welcome to the Halava Fantasy Football League show. We're going to do a recap. Today's drink, it's called a buttercream. I don't want to try something that's more like a dessert. The ingredients are Bailey's, butterscotch liqueur, and milk. I subbed out the milk with oat milk. And I wanted it a little bit stiffer, so I added some cognac. It's like a milkshake. It's like a boozy milkshake. It is like a dessert. Anyway, we'll do something a little bit different this week because immediately after last week's recap, the following day was the trade deadline. And then immediately things had happened that drastically impacted your teams. So even though I just made an assessment on how everyone's teams were going to be like going forward, based on the moves that happened at the trade deadline, it caused stock up, stock down type of actions going on. So if we talk about the trade deadlines moves before and then kind of like guess what kind of impacts it might have, then we can have like immediate feedback based on their performances for the, what week is this? The week 9 recap. Let's talk about the trade deadline. One of them, Colts traded running back Nyheim Hines to the Bills for Zach Moss. Doesn't seem like it would make a huge difference for both teams. Hines does go to a better offense outside of Stephon Diggs, especially in the running game for the Bills. It's been a crapshoot, so I don't know how he would do at the time. The lead running back is the quarterback. Does it help Jonathan Taylor by shipping Nyheim Hines and then maybe bringing Zach Moss in? Well, Zach Moss, I don't know if he's better than Nyheim Hines. Hines is a little bit more seasoned and more experienced. Zach Moss didn't really do anything for the Bills, so maybe Tyler doesn't have as much looking over his shoulder. But even then, he's been banged up, and so he has been stocked down this year. As far as the trade goes, it doesn't really help either team, I think. The Atlanta Falcons sent Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars, and because we have no keepers, it has no effect this year. So it doesn't even matter because he's suspended for the season. So maybe in the future, he'll be a big deal for the Jaguars. The next trade, 49ers traded Jeff Wilson Jr. to the Dolphins. I think for Jeff Wilson, it does improve his stock a little because his stock just took a hit when CMC came in, right? Once he moves away from CMC, he can reunite with McDaniel. He's actually used to playing with Raheem Mostert. They played together before, so there's some chemistry there. So maybe it helps the stock a little bit. Chase Edmonds' stock gets tanked because he gets bumped down a bit. And then in San Francisco, CMC is just reinforced as the number one back. Less competition for CMC. At the very least, maybe it makes Tyrion David Price a little bit more valuable of a handcuff in case CMC gets hurt. The next trade, the Broncos trade Chubb to the Dolphins. When I first heard Chubb to the Dolphins, I was like, wait, what? So can you imagine Nick Chubb on the Dolphins? What kind of havoc that would wreak on our league? And then it says Edmonds to Denver. But it wasn't Nick Chubb. It was the outside linebacker, I think Brandon Chubb. So it does help the defense a little bit. I know the secondary has been the biggest problem, so they're trying to shore it up a little bit. I mean, it indirectly affects Miami's offense, right? Because Miami becomes a very, very valuable fantasy team only because the defense gives up points so easily. So they have to get into these track meets and just keep scoring points over and over. So by improving the defense even a little bit, maybe that goes down a bit. But even then, I think the secondary has been more of a problem for them than their linebackers or their pass rush. The Steelers, they traded Chase Claypool to the Bears. So maybe it improves Claypool's stock. Doesn't really move the needle for me. Recently, he started to come on, but mostly he was a non-factor for the Steelers. But what it does, I guess, improve the stock back up for the wide receivers on Pittsburgh because that's more targets for Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. The Lions, this was a big one. Lions sent the tight end TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings, and then of course it's like a big shock. I think this might have been one of the biggest shocks. Stock wise, I don't think it changes much for Hawkinson because he goes from one explosive offense to another, and maybe the hope for him, I guess in the case for Jeremy, having Hawkinson, maybe he can have more consistency, and that would make him a lot more valuable. I'm not holding my breath, but who knows? I think he did do good this week. But what he has done and shown throughout the years with Detroit, he'll have one really amazing game every 5 weeks, and then he'll miss a bunch of time due to injury. It obviously completely tanks Irv Smith, who went down with an injury prior to the trade. It actually probably forced that trade. So can you imagine if Irv Smith doesn't get that high ankle sprain? Then maybe this trade doesn't happen. For the Lions, I wouldn't really touch. At this time, I wouldn't have touched the tight ends. There's some potential there. Brock Wright has been, I think, the number two, and then the rookie who has come off of the ACL injury, James Mitchell. I have high hopes for him, but I think he's gonna need time to develop to be more consistent. And then we don't really talk about the defensive trade. We did talk about Chubb. But the Bears did trade Roquan Smith to the Ravens. That might be the biggest defensive trade. The leading tackler at the time in the NFL goes to a historically great defense. So it does affect the Ravens defense by adding a guy who just seems to fit there, right? Ravens always have pretty solid defensive players. And then what has affected the stock too for some people is Michael Thomas goes on IR, so that affects the New Orleans receivers. Maybe as Olave gets a little bit healthier, he'll get more targets, and then more targets all around. And then for Baltimore, Rashad Bateman had a Liz Frank injury. Been trying to come back from it until he just made it worse, and so that affects the wide receivers in Baltimore. So does that improve Duvernay stock? Who else is on the bench as far as their wide receivers goes? Maybe that means more running, but they've been battling injuries all around. Like I said, I think Bateman was a guy they drafted high last year, and it was hopeful that he could be the number one guy, but now he's out. You can see how it changes and affects everyone's teams, because it does. With players moving to other locations, it affects teams that they're going to, and then the teams that they just vacated, maybe that means more targets, more carries, things of that nature. So let's get to the recap now and see some of how these were affected. We'll go to the first one. Actually, these first few, a lot of them had good potential to go down to the wire. Most of these games, I think all but two of the games, had Monday night players. So Mia Milo versus Brownsville Jets. I finally snapped my 5-game losing streak and get a win over Mike. Mike had another down week, 89.86. I think he's been dealing with injuries. And also, this was a heavy bye week for him. It was a bye for me, but my team was set up to handle this bye. Even though these guys were out, I still had pretty solid players there, and a lot of them are getting a lot more healthy. So what was the down to the wire thing? It was all four Baltimore players and positions. I had Isaiah Likely. I subbed him in for Pollard, who was out, and I have the Baltimore D, who I've drafted. And then it was against Lamar Jackson and Kenyon Drake. Now, it was a big lead. I had a big lead coming into Monday, and he would have needed a big game from both Lamar Jackson and Kenyon Drake, because I also was able to stave him off with Likely and the Baltimore D. It looks like what he needed was an outstanding game from Lamar Jackson, but they didn't really need it because New Orleans, they couldn't keep pace, and they were able to just coast. Kenyon Drake did really good, though. Like we were saying, how they had Gus Edwards was looking like he might be the guy. He was inactive today, so they gave the ball to Drake, and he did a good job. Eckler did pretty solid, and then the biggest reasons I think for Mike is, in addition to having a super heavy bye week. Look at this. Everybody but Tonga Viola was all out. Marquise Brown is still injured, but Woods only gave him 0.44, and then this is the one where they had a black hole game for the Rams. Rams is definitely trending down. Tyler Higbee had a bagel. Van Jefferson had a donut, and a former Rams, Woods, had 0.44. Then McKenzie only 3.2. So really, really hard. Even though you had solid games from Drake and Eckler, that's definitely not going to win most weeks. And then for me, the most notable thing for me, because I didn't have really outstanding scores either, but Justin Fields had a huge game. He set a record with 178 rushing yards. He broke like Michael Vick's record. So that's the most rushing yards by a quarterback. So it's looking like a home run for me because it seems like the Bears have decided to. Well, I don't know if I want to give the Bears credit, but they are scheming to run him more. But they haven't helped him from the beginning of the year. They didn't draft any offensive line help, and at the trade deadline, they gave him Chase Claypool. And like I said, it's a meh kind of move, right? He might be the guy who's like, forget it, I'll do it all myself, and that really bodes well for me. Hopefully for my team going forward, a lot of these guys are getting a little bit healthier. Foreman had a letdown because Carolina got destroyed by Cincinnati, and Michael Carter. This is the game that I was hoping for from him the previous week. Looked pretty solid. 12 rushing attempts, 76 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and 1 reception for 10 yards. That's pretty good floor for RB1. So hopefully that helps me going forward. The next up, this is another one that was ridiculously close, razor thin close, and it boiled down to Taysom Hill. He had Andrews on there, who's a Baltimore player too, but he was out. So I think I can understand Gary not feeling that tight end slot because, outside of the top 5, the rest are just as likely to give you 0 or 1 as they are to give you 10. Even actually, I would skew it more on the low points. So just tossing that game. Gary left some points there on the bench. He could have had an extra point from T-Law instead of Kirk Cousins. Rondell Moore had a pretty decent game, 10.9. Maybe he's playing him instead of Gabe Davis. Moore kind of fell off a cliff after riding high for the past couple of weeks. Jones only 6.4. That was a fun game to watch. And then finally, you had that breakout game from Davante Adams, 31.6, had a couple of touchdowns. Big week for Gary, almost 3 out of 3, almost a triple crown for the week. He got the win in fantasy. He got the big game from Davante Adams, but his team, the Raiders, lost. Almost had it, Gary. And then for Eric, this was a throwaway game for him. As you can see, he did not play a kicker or a defense. I think because he wanted the San Francisco defense, so he made a move for them, even though it's their bye week. And he ended up throwing this game, even though he definitely could have won. Because I think had he played Kyle Pitts instead of Taysom Hill, is that enough of a margin to catch? I mean, it puts it right there. 86.46 by Eric, a minus 1.32 from Taysom Hill, and then we add Kyle Pitts 3.7, 88.84. Yeah, Eric would have won with Kyle Pitts instead of playing Taysom Hill. That was weird because just watching the whole Monday night, it's like I could understand if he was like hurt and not playing, but he had a couple of plays. He had 1 completion for 13 passing yards and 1 rushing attempt for 6 rushing yards. Couldn't just give him one more carry or 1 more reception. But even though it was a throwaway game, Gary is able to eke him out. Anything else interesting from their teams? Aaron Rodgers. Oh, Lazard actually did pretty good. This was a super fun game for me to watch. It was fun to watch Rodgers because he threw 3 picks for the first time in a long time. It was at the hands of my Lions. It was awesome. So Kirby Joseph had 2. There was like one where Aaron Rodgers threw the ball at Derek Barnes' helmet, bounced in the air. Okuda and Kirby went for it. And Kirby got the first one. Kirby was amazing too because he got another pick right before on the 1-yard line. He had an amazing pass breakup there too, and then even our defensive end first round pick, Aiden Hutchinson got in the game. He had a pretty nice play. Seeing his guy rub him off and try to go get the pass, recognizing that that's a pass play for him, he turned around and booked it and grabbed the interception off Aaron Rodgers. It was so nice to see, and I enjoyed it very, very much. Okay. So, the other game that was a lot closer than this final score looked because it was about a 1 to 2 point margin for the longest time. I think it boiled down to Justin Tucker Duvernay. Remember what we said about Duvernay? Maybe more carry, maybe more targets for him because Bateman isn't there. He only had 1 reception for 5 receiving yards. I saw him returning kicks too, but he didn't really do anything with that. So not enough. I think you need quite a bit of yards to make any sort of dent on kick returns or punt returns. And what really got the separation for Darren was Justin Tucker being able to kick a couple of nice field goals. Yeah, 73 total yards of field goals is a nice extra boost there. So that kind of got the separation for him. He nearly lost though, because look, I mean, as bad as these scores are by Brad, Mariota only 9.26, Myers only 6, Duvernay 1. Henderson, again, that black hole with the Rams, 6.8. Knox, 4. Garrett Wilson is a good pickup. See, like we're saying, I kind of said, look for him to get more of a share, even though he had this weird play where he was trying to fake a touchdown and he nearly blew it by throwing it on the ground. He got 14 points, so hopefully that's a guy who can get you some good points going forward. And then here's the other trade guy. Justin Wilson had 15.6, so that's kind of a nice boost. But the big one, I think the heavy hitter for the week, Joe Mixon had 55.3 points. He had a 5 touchdown game, 4 rushing touchdown, 1 receiver. So that nearly got him the win, but it was just a little bit too much Justin Tucker in the end, so Darren gets the win there. And then as far as the Claypool, 2.8 points. All the points went to Justin Fields there, so it is what it is. Maybe, hopefully, it's just a matter of gaining some chemistry going forward, so we'll see what happens. Again, big bye week games for Darren, so. Next up, I think this is the last one that had potential of being a close one. I mean, of having a game, like it kind of boiled down to Alvin Kamara, because Morgan built up a pretty big lead by Sunday. Nobody playing on Monday, but Richie did have Kamara, and like we saw a couple weeks before, he definitely has potential to like score big, right? Like, had he scored in addition, if he had a 40-point game, like similar to like what we saw with Mixon, then that's a win for Richie. But Morgan gets his second win, so congrats to him. Allen, he had a really pretty good game, but in terms of like real life, it was kind of a junk because he had 2 interceptions and they actually lost surprisingly to the Jets. AJ Brown gave him 13.9. Kenneth Walker, I said, I told you so. He looks like an amazing back. 29 points. He was my RB2 of the rookie class, and he's just killing it there. Even though it looked like last week, right? He had a down week and all of a sudden a touchdown out of nowhere. And then Nick Folk, big kicker game, 20.3. Even with the big bye week, no Sutton, no Judy, no Prescott, Huntley and Conklin not doing anything of note. And then for Richie, he had a big game from Travis Etienne. Again, like the effect of trading away a guy like Robinson, he had 28 rushing attempts. That's insane. 28 rushing attempts for 109 rushing yards. Even if the yards per carry is inefficient, just that volume alone just makes him super valuable. All I hope for you, Richie, is that the Jaguars do not run him into the ground and he gets hurt and you lose him for the final stretch in the playoffs. But he has the perfect storm, right? He's the number 1 guy. They're giving him all the volume and he is producing. So you got that going for you. Okay. Next up, Hurt So Good versus getting everyone's best game. Looking at the quarterbacks, these are, to me, like the 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks, including Josh Allen. Mahomes had one of the biggest games for a quarterback this season, having 43 completions, 446 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 6 rushing attempts, 63 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. So really big game, and that kind of like gave him enough separation and was able to. Naheem Hines, right? Took a chance. Maybe Naheem Hines is going to be the feature back. He only gave him 0.72. CEH, only 2.8. He only had 4 carries, 5 rushing yards. Did have one nice catch for 14 yards. Nothing much to write home for the defense and the kicker. Pretty decent game from Palmer. That's a nice pickup and play. Goddard had a really good game, and Jefferson had a solid game too. Just mostly because of Mahomes kind of put Mike to bed. Mike had an okay game for Hurts. Curtis Samuel had a 15.7 points, and this could have been a lot less if it wasn't for the help of a referee. A referee who cleared out one of the defensive backs, opening up a spot for Curtis Samuel. But give Curtis Samuel the credit because he did make the catch and he got the touchdown. So good for him. Robinson, as a Jet, had his first big game, 13.6. He had 13 rushing attempts, 48 rushing yards, 2 receiving. So it looks like they're going to split the workload between him and Michael Carter. I feel like Carter's probably just slightly ahead, but Robinson is a talent. Depends on how it goes. Carter's the younger guy, so we'll see. We'll see. It's just going to be interesting, like in the future when Brees Hall comes back. They have a great running back room in New York. Kelsey had a solid game, 15.6. MVS had only 1.7. Younghae Koo only 5.4. And a mini D only 6.9. Darnell Mooney had a good game, 14.1. And then for Aaron, Geno Smith, 25 points. Maybe consider flipping him. Okay, Patrick Mahomes completed his bye and he's done. So you're done with Geno Smith. So I'm going to create a market for him. Anybody who's in need of a quarterback, go see Aaron. And then, I mean, it's good for you, Aaron. If you want a better running back, anything else, someone needs a quarterback, go see Aaron. Or Aaron, if you're looking for better depth or trying to improve your maybe running game, because outside of Saquon Barkley, you have CEH, Naeem Hines, and then you're banking on Kyron Williams. But like we said, the Rams are kind of trash right now. Maybe they can turn around. We'll see. And then the last game, James versus Jeremy. This game was kind of over. James had a chance to catch up, but he would have to have relied on Will Lutz. So even though Lutz had 9 points, that was nowhere enough to catch up. Jeremy, I don't know if he was trying to give the game away because this is very puzzling. Garoppolo had no game. They had a bye week. He played him anyway. And he had Herbert, who had 16.2. So unless you were worried about Herbert giving you a negative game, you just didn't play a quarterback. So that was an interesting choice. For James, he had a super heavy bye week. As you can see, all of these San Francisco players were out. Daniel Jones was out. CeeDee Lamb didn't have a game. Mitchell had nothing. So both heavy bye weeks for both. Both relatively low scores. But Jeremy gets the win here. Tyreek Hill had a solid game, 23.8. Other than that, not much to write home about. Tom Brady and the rest of the aging quarterbacks just have not been doing good. Hopkins, 11.6, which is okay. And then Moore looks like he didn't get a snap or he's injured. I'm not sure. And then for Jeremy, what kind of helped him get the wins was Derrick Henry, 25.2. And then for the first time, Devontae Adams scored more than him. But you still get the win, so it doesn't really matter. Singletary, 7.6. So he's seemingly still the best running back in Buffalo. But that's not saying much. TJ Hawkinson, what were we expecting out after the trade? 9 receptions, 70 receiving yards. So pretty solid game for TJ. Just big question mark. Are you going to get that consistency going forward? Tyler Lockett has been really good. 5 receptions, 67 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. He's been solid. Suckup as a kicker, pretty decent. And then on your bench, like we said, you left Herbert on the bench. Pacheco, 3.46. Again, there's still some uncertainty in the Kansas City backfield. Chris Olave had a pretty decent game today, 10.10. But nothing much better than what you had. Actually, yeah, no, he would have been better than Michael Pittman. And then Nicole Hardman had a super solid game, 18.58. receiving touchdown and his 42 and 76 receptions, 79 receiving yards. So I know he's pretty good game. Romeo Dubs only had 2.3. He had that catch and he got hurt. So like we were saying, felt like he was gonna be kind of the guy that he was that Aaron Rodgers was trying to groom to be the guy, but he got hurt. Christian Watson is the higher ranked player, but he's been hurt. And actually, Allen Lazard has looked really good. I mean, not really good. He's been the best lately of the bunch. Yeah, so that's the recaps. Anything else? No? All right.